This conference will now be recorded.
So we're living in very polarized times, and I think it's almost unprecedented that this polarization has made its way so much into our Bate Knesiot, into our houses of worship. And that's troubling, and that's very, very serious, and that's something that I have worked very, very strenuously to make sure that it doesn't happen by us. And Baruch Hashem, I could say, to the best of my knowledge, it is not an issue by us. People have their opinions. People have their very strident and strong opinions, and nevertheless, we can respect and get along with others who see it differently, and we focus on the really important things about us. And that's what we need to do. And that is based on this pasuk that we will begin with. Hello, Rose, good to see you. This pasuk that we will begin with, which is the source of this, Lo tikom, in Vayikra, source number 1, Lo tikom, do not take revenge. Velo titor, don't harbor animosity, meaning there are times that we might not act on it, that's taking revenge, but nevertheless we harbor that animosity. Do not do either at b'nei amecha, to the people of your people, to the members of your people. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself. Ani Hashem, I am Hashem. This is often quoted as one of the pillars of the Judeo-Christian teachings, and I believe it's also mentioned in the New Testament, but simply it's copied from the Torah. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you shall love your fellow as yourself, and we will see some different parameters on that. Hello Ken, hello Norman. We'll see some different parameters on that and how it's meant to apply. Onkelos, who is the famous convert of Roman ancestry, who left it all behind and became a righteous convert, to the point that his explanation on the most sparse of Chumashim, of Torah volumes, you'll just have the Psukim, Rashi, and Onkelos, which speaks to the meritocracy of the Torah world, meaning it's not one's lineage, it's what one produces. You know, the famous story of Hillel, when he was unable to pay to enter into a shul, and he climbed up to hear a shiur, to hear classes, and he climbed up onto the roof and was listening by the skylight to hear the shiur. Whose class was he listening to? It was the shiur being given by Shemaiah and Avtalion. Unusual names, and they were both Gerim, they were both converts. Okay, Onkelos explains, Lo tikom v'lo titor, divavo livnei amach u'turachem lechavrecha kivatech. He says the idea is terachem, and have compassion for your fellow as you have for yourself. Once again, Ani Hashem, I am God. And the Sifra, also famous quote, Rabbi Akiva said, Ze klal, number 3, Ze klal gadol ba'Torah. This is a fundamental principle. This is the very foundation of the Torah. And there are those that ask, well, isn't that a fundamental principle of one aspect of our mitzvot, which is between mankind and mankind? But there's a whole other aspect of our mitzvot, and that is between man and God. So where is that mentioned? And there are different approaches that are taken. Anybody want to venture a thought or an opinion? So again, The pasuk says, "Love your neighbor as yourself." This pasuk, ze klal gadol, that is a fundamental principle of the Torah. Well, isn't that a fundamental principle of one aspect of bein adam lechavero, man to man? But how about between man and God? Where is that? So there are a number of approaches. One is Ani Hashem. The pasuk goes on to say, "I am Hashem." So the pasuk actually contains both. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. That is bein adam lechavero, between a person and their friend. Ani Hashem, I am Hashem. That is between us and God. That is one approach. Another, yes, Chai Rivka.
Doesn't also the design of the Ten Commandments show the connection between man and God?
I'm sorry, say it again, please.
Doesn't the design, the way it's written and organized, the Ten Commandments, doesn't that show a relationship between man and God?
That is correct. The Ten Commandments are split, the first 5 between man and God, second 5 between man and man, right? But this is not found in the Ten Commandments. This is not one of the 10, right? Yeah. And another approach is that Reyacha actually can even apply to Hashem. And therefore, this actually, your fellow, so to speak, right? So this actually encompasses both between mankind and between man and Hashem. Okay, source number 4, we have the famous Gemara, the Gemara in Shabbos, the famous story about Masa ben Nachri Echad, a certain Gentile, Shabalafnei Shammai, who came before Shammai. Amalon, he said, Gayareni, convert me. And I want to learn the entire Torah while I'm standing on one foot. Dachvu oto b'amat habinyan. Shammai unceremoniously pushed him away using a measuring stick that was in his hand. Shammai viewed this as incredible disrespect. It would be like me going to a brain surgeon who, after going through college, pre-med, medical school, residency, internship, and then focusing, spending 10, 15 years on brain surgery, has become the premier brain surgeon. And I go to him and I say, listen, I'd like you to teach me all about neurology, brain, everything, and down to surgery. And I'll give you about 15 seconds to explain it to me. So it's an affront to this person's skill, knowledge, and all that this person has put. It ends up demeaning the topic that I'm asking him. If I say in 15 seconds, maybe the guy was a good balancer. So maybe it was 45 seconds on one foot. Whatever it is, that is how Shammai viewed this. Balafnei Hillel. He then came before Hillel, Gaire, and Hillel agreed. He converted him. And he said, you want to learn the entire Torah on one foot? He said to him, Da'alach sani lechavrecha lo tavid. That which is hateful to you, don't do to your friends. Zoe kol Torah kula. That's the entire Torah. V'idach, the rest. Perusha is simply the explanation. Zil gemor. Go and learn it. Right? But that's the entire Torah. Right? This has been coined as the golden rule, and which parent hasn't said to a child, do you want to be treated that way? If you don't want to be treated that way, don't treat someone else that way. Right? But it's interesting to note that Hillel reversed it. He didn't say what we should do, which is how the pasuk is based, that you shall love your fellow like yourself, but rather he reversed it. That which would be hateful to you, don't do to someone else. But the Kli Yakar, before we get to that idea, the Kli Yakar, so Hillel understood this person's motive, this person's approach, what this person was seeking. Hillel viewed it in a positive way. And therefore, he took this fellow under his wing and brought this person to conversion. And the Kli Yakar explains how it was that Hillel viewed this person. Source number 5, the Kli Yakar writes, it seems, this was a ger tzedek, a righteous convert. And he was not mocking, lomar, saying b'derech schok, in a derisive manner, to teach him the entire Torah while he's standing on one foot. Elavadai, rather, bikesh mamish yamidlo kol mitzvot Torah al yisod echad. He wanted it all to be not on one foot, on one foundation. He said, I'm approaching Torah. I understand there's 613 mitzvot. I want to know the pillar. I want to know the base, the foundation that it's all based upon. And then it manifests itself. It branches itself out in 613 different ways. That's what he wanted to know. That's the yesod, that's the regel. Regel, not while I'm standing on one foot, but I want that one foundation. That one foundation upon which all the mitzvot are based. So that I won't come to forget, which become by a person coming in late in life who has not learned it from their youth. He asked him, give me that one overriding foundation principle, hakolel kol Torah, which includes the entire Torah. And he expressed it in such a way as saying, while I'm standing on one foot. But he wasn't mocking at all. He wanted to know what is that fundamental principle of the entire Torah. The Kavanah told him, Solo davar nemar mehera v'loshen katzar, but agam kein yisod v'regel achat. By the shizkol klal zeis kol kol mitzvot Hashem. And therefore, Hillel gave him this all-encompassing principle with which he'd be able to remember all of the mitzvot. Okay, so Hillel viewed his approaching him in a positive manner and took him under his wings, and he became, and he properly converted as a result. So this then, according to this explanation, the Kli Yakar and Hillel's approach, this is the fundamental principle of the entire Torah. We mentioned before source number 6, the Sefer HaChinuch, which really means the book of education, what a father wrote for his son, going through all of the 613 mitzvot and giving the parameter, the source, the parameters, and the shoresh, the root of the matter. And he writes, for him this is mitzvah 243. The elements included in this mitzvah follow the general principle that one should treat another person the way he would treat himself, protecting his property, preventing him from being harmed, speaking only well of him, respecting him, and certainly not glorifying oneself at his expense. Right? We'll see the actual source about that a little later on. But certainly not glorifying myself by putting someone else down at the expense of another. The sage have said regarding this last point, one who glorifies himself at the expense of his fellow has no share in the world to come. Whereas one who behaves with others in a loving and peaceful manner fulfills the verse, Yisroel asher b'cha et pa'ar. That's a verse from Yeshayahu, from Isaiah. Israel, by whom God says, I am glorified. Now, at times, this takes some work, as we see in source number 7 from the Sefer Yereim. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, tziva HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God commanded us, and Rabbi Akiva, right? Kamocha ani Hashem, right? The whole lesson, he said, love means, okay, Zakal, shelo lasot lo v'lo lomar davar hamasur lilibo, right? Not to do something and not to say something that will adversely affect him, that'll be hurtful to him. V'im toma, a person might ask, hey, acheda, how do I know? V'chi navi ani, right? Am I a prophet? Right? How do I know what this person's sensitivity is and that person's sensitivity is? How do I know that this person, I don't know, maybe got up on the wrong side of the bed, didn't have his morning coffee? How am I supposed to know? And he says, therefore, the pasuk says, kamocha, like yourself. Perish mimcha Talmud, learn from yourself. Davar shata yodea shemasul lebecha, right? That which you know in your heart. That is what Hillel meant when he said, whatever is hateful to you, do not do to your friend. This is the whole Torah, the rest is commentary, right? So you know about yourself. You know when people say things, certain things, it gets under your skin. If they say things in a certain way, it gets under your skin. You know that sometimes you've had a tough morning, and you might be a little bit short with someone, and you wish that they would have the understanding to cut you some slack and understand, listen, I'm sorry, it wasn't nice, but I'm having a rough day. Kamocha, right? Look at yourself. How would you want to be treated? I think it's a famous story with Yisroel Salanter, I believe it is. I forget which Musar great this was with. If someone knows, please correct me or let me know. That he said he learned about this concept from two drunken fellows. And an example, Boris says to Ivor, do you love me? And he says, of course I love you. Do you really love me? Of course I really love you. So that's the case. He said, so tell me what's bothering me. Tell me what hurts me. Right? If we really love, really care for someone, then we try to anticipate. We try to get into their head. What is it that might hurt that person? What is it that will lift that person up, make that person happy, make that person feel good? So to try to use your perception and insight, as it says in the heading of number 7, to ascertain what bothers your neighbor and what will lift your neighbor up, what will make him feel good. Now, the Sefer HaChinuch takes this teaching of Hillel, who took it from the positive, love your neighbor as yourself, to don't do to him that which you would not want done to yourself. The Sefer HaChinuch, right, continues in mitzvah 243, right? It's interesting. You see, the Sefer Yereim was mitzvah 224. Sefer HaChinuch is mitzvah 243. There are different ways of enumerating these mitzvah. We've discussed that before. We had the Rambam, Maimonides, Ramban. They all reach a tally of 613. That the Gemara says clearly. But which ones are included, which ones are not included, which ones are categorized together, which one are counted individually, and what is the actual order, that we have different opinions on. But again, in source 8, he says, the sages have said, Dalach sani lechavrecha lo taveh, that which is hateful to you, do not do to your friend. And it's said in the Sifri, we quoted both of these above. Rabbi Akiva said, Ze klal gadol b'Torah. This is a fundamental principle in the Torah, meaning that many commandments are related to this one, in the respect that one who loves his fellow will not steal his belongings. There's a mitzvah, don't steal. Well, if I love my friend as myself, no one wants their things to be stolen, to be taken. So I love my friend like myself, I won't steal, nor be unfaithful with his wife, right? He will not commit adultery with someone else's wife, or he won't be unfaithful to his own spouse, wife or husband, depending who we are, right? Because that also, right, the greatest horror would be if a spouse is unfaithful. So therefore, we will not be unfaithful. Nor will he defraud, right, cause someone or insult, nor trespass upon a property, nor cause damage in any way. Thus, the fulfillment of many other commandments is dependent upon the fulfillment of this one. So this truly is the bedrock for all of our interpersonal dealings. The Sefer Mitzvot Hagadol, also, he takes this a step further. And he says, Klal shel davar, the root of this that we say, that it's hated to you, don't do to your friend. Right? And he says, imagine a person sitting and cutting a piece of meat, who accidentally cuts his own hand with the knife. Would it be logical for him to hit the hand holding the knife in revenge? How dare you cut me, and start to hit that hand? Nevertheless, this analogy only applies to a person who is your comrade in scholarship and deeds. So therefore, we're supposed to look at others as an extension of ourselves. And therefore, I'm not going to take revenge on someone else. That is a part of me. We are all part of this general goof, this general entity known as the Jewish people. And this is a concept that runs through so many things that we do, right? We say that we're supposed to feel, at the Pesach Seder, we say a person is supposed to feel as if they left Egypt. How can I possibly feel as if I left Egypt? I didn't leave Egypt. At the Seder, I'm sitting in my nice, comfortable home in Irvine, California. I'm not leaving Egypt. How am I supposed to feel? But Rabbi Schwab says so beautifully. He says, when you look at a baby picture of yourself when you were 4 years old, 5 years old, you say, hey, that was me with hair. Who would have thought, right? You look at the picture, say, that was me. But in fact, none of the cells that you are looking at in that picture are still on your face. Not a single cell that you are looking at. Maybe a few brain cells, probably not even those, right? But none of the cells that you are looking at that you can see in that picture are still there. So why is that you? So why are you correct when you say, that's me, that's a picture of me? Because the body stays the same and the cells regenerate. So there are new cells, but it's the same person, it's the same body. And he says that's how it is with the Jewish people also. Every generation is another set of cells, which live and then gets replaced. But it's all the same body. It's all the same entity. And I've shared before that when I was a teenager, and I had the privilege of spending a Shabbos with Rabbi Hillel Zaks, who was a grandson of the Chafetz Chaim and a Rosh Yeshiva of the Chevron Yeshiva in Yerushalayim, where one of my sons later attended. And a friend of mine and I, who were there for Shabbos together, we were grappling with a certain issue, which we didn't bring up to the rabbi. And as we're walking to shul, Shabbos afternoon for Mincha, out of the clear blue, he just starts to address that issue that my friend and I have been struggling with. and he dealt with it head on. Years later, I had the privilege of driving. He came to speak at the yeshiva where I was then teaching, and I drove him back home. And I mentioned this story to him, and he explained to me as follows. He said, we are all one body. We're all one goof. We're all one entity. And he said, if the right arm is doing a lot of exercise, what happens? The body sends over an increased blood flow to that right arm to deliver more oxygen and to deliver more energy, whatever it needs, right? The body senses there's a part of the body in need, and it adjusts and it gives it what it needs. He said, we're all one body, we're all one entity, we're all Am Yisroel, the nation of Israel. And therefore, this part of the body, you and your friend needed to hear something. So that part of the body, meaning himself, shifted it over and addressed that point. So when we look at one another as being, we're all one essence. So then I'm not going to take revenge. I'm not going to hurt myself further because part of me hurt me. I'm not going to hurt myself further as a result of that. An incredible insight from this Sefer HaMitzvahs Haggadah, the Smag. Incredible insight. And certainly when we're dealing with a polarized society, when we look at one another and understand this is more than just my brother or sister, this is an extension of me, so then we work hard at making sure that there is shalom, that there is peaceful coexistence. Now he goes further on the bottom half of source 9, and he says this analogy only applies to the person who is your comrade in scholarship and deeds. Regarding an evil person who does not accept rebuke, it is a mitzvah to hate that person, and discussed further in source number 12. I didn't want anybody to see that and then lose their internet connection and walk away with that. So there's more on that. We'll come back to that soon. Let us continue to source number 9, the Maharsha. The Maharsha is one of the classic commentators found in the back of each Talmud, and he comments on the halachic aspects of the Gemara, but then he explains the midrashic aspects of the Gemara, the Agadata. So this is Chidushei Agadot on that story on Shabbat 31a, which is the story of Hillel and that convert who wanted to learn the entire Torah while standing on one foot. And the Maharsha writes as follows: whatever is hateful to you, etc., refers to that which is written in the Torah, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. We can ask, why did Hillel alter the mitzvah by phrasing it in the negative? Whatever is hateful to you, do not do unto your friend, as opposed to going into the positive. The answer is that the mitzvah itself is a type of prohibition, just like the other mitzvah in this verse, right? Remember, the verse began, do not take revenge, do not harbor animosity, do not bear a grudge, and you shall love your fellow as you love yourself is not an imperative to bestow an equal amount of goodness upon another, which we know from the legal principle of chayecha kodem, your life comes first. That should sound familiar to all of my esteemed colleagues here, because last week when we discussed vaccines, we discussed the concept, we had the Gemara of Rabbi Akiva and chayecha kodem. Your life takes precedence over the life of someone else. The classic, you're in the desert and you got a canteen of water. If you split it with your fellow traveler, you're both going to die of thirst before you reach civilization. Chayecha kodem. So therefore your life does come first. We don't say it's an equal. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Well, I have to split it, right? No, your life does come first. That's why the Maharsha explains that it was placed into as the first two mitzvot are, don't take revenge, don't carry a grudge, don't bear animosity, don't do to someone else that which you don't want to have done to yourself. And also, as was quoted up above, this is serious, serious stuff. Right? We'll see the last source when we get to that about the effect it's had on the nation of Israel for thousands of years at this point. But on a more personal level, Yosef Chanina said, "Hamitchabed b'klon chavero." If I'm getting honor through the disgrace of someone else, ein lo chelek lo'olam haba. That person forfeits their portion in the world to come. If we humiliate someone else and we get our honor through putting down someone else, that is as serious as it gets. And we learn that we therefore, source number 11, the Gemara and Kedushin, talking about marriage, we'll soon see how this plays in, how we have to be so careful to structure ourselves both communally and personally to not cause someone else pain, hurt. Rabbi Yehuda said, Amar Yehuda Marav, Asul Adam lekadosh et ha'isha ad sheyira ena. Right now, in our world, it's less of it's more of a given, but in the not just Jewish world, but in the general world back then, children were married off to one another, very often without them ever having seen one another. Kings would marry off their children to one another as a means of building alliances and guaranteeing that there'll be peace between the two sides. But the Gemara says it's prohibited. Yehuda said the name of Rav. It's prohibited for a person to marry a woman until he first sees her. He has to see her first. Why? Because maybe after they're married, he might find her to be displeasing, distasteful. And the Torah says, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha." You have to love your fellow as yourself, and therefore you can't create a situation where you will be causing pain and hurt to another person. That's how careful we have to be. Now, I mentioned before that we had to come back to source number 12, which we're doing right now, right? So an evildoer who does not accept rebuke, it's a mitzvah to hate that person. So Rav Shner Zalman of Liadi, the Balatanya, says as follows. Regarding that which is stated in the Talmud, it is a mitzvah to hate someone who sins. This refers to someone who is equal in learning and deeds and whom we have properly rebuked. But if he does not fit this description, Hillel has taught us, be like the disciples of Aaron. La'olam yehei mitamidav shel Aaron. A person should always aspire and actually be like the students of Aaron. Meaning what? Emulating the way of Aaron. Ohev shalom, loving peace. Rodev shalom, pursuing peace. Ohev et habriot, loving God's creations. Umekarvan l'Torah, and bringing them close to Torah. And the wording here is very, very important. It doesn't say love people. It says love God's creations. So it's not just telling you what to do, it's giving you a means, how it is that you can do that. If you look at every person as God's creation, which goes back to our first pasuk, love your neighbor, your fellow to yourself. Ani Hashem. I am Hashem. Meaning the same way I created you, I created that person. Recognize the same way that you're in the image of God, that person is in the image of God. The same way that you're a child of God, that person is a child of God. Now, if we're getting short with somebody, we're losing our patience. And imagine if all of a sudden someone will say to you, that's your long lost brother. That's your long lost sister. Or that's your best friend's son or daughter. Oh. All of a sudden we find some patience inside of us. I didn't know That's my best friend's son. That's my best friend's daughter. All of a sudden we have some patience. Ani Hashem. And that's what it says here, the students of Aaron, loving God's creatures. Who is that person that you're about to lose it on? Hashem's child. Not only that, that person is carrying a part of Hashem in them, as each and every one of us does. So let's take my example a step further. Not only do you find out that this is your best friend's son, but you find out that his phone is on. And your best friend, his father, is listening to every word that you're saying to this child of his. Whoa. So if I was about to lose my patience, and knowing that this is my best friend's son didn't deter me, but once I realized that my friend is listening in to everything that I have to say, all of a sudden, I'm cool, calm, and collected. I'm in control. I'm not going to say anything that's going to offset this person. That's me, Talmidav Shel Aaron, loving peace, pursuing peace. Ohev et habriot, loving the creatures. A creature is someone who has been created. Loving God's creatures, God's creations. Umekarvan the Torah, and drawing them close to Torah. Those who are far from God's Torah must be drawn close. How? With strong bonds of love. Thus, the mitzvah to love and to hate coexist. It's a mitzvah to hate the evil that exists within a person while loving the hidden spark of godliness that resides within him, and doing everything we can to get rid of that evil aspect that person has. We return to our Sefer HaChinuch for the third time, going back there, mitzvah 243, and he says, Shoresh HaMitzvah Yadua, the root, the base of this mitzvah is known, Ki Kamo Sheyasehu B'Chaveiro, Ken Yaseh Chaveiro Bo. The way you treat someone else is how they're going to be treating you. Ubazeh Yesh Shalom Bein HaBriot. And with that, there'll be peace amongst all living beings. We treat others with respect. They treat you, they treat others. All right, I've said this a number of times. Try this next time you're shopping and you're checking out. Give a nice smile to the person checking out. They're harried, it's been a long day, a lot of people. Give them a nice smile and thank them for the work that they're doing. Wish them a good day. See how they're doing. It's amazing how the smile, besides it bringing shivers up and down your spine and making you feel good, look at the difference in that person. We talk a lot about contagion, how things are so contagious. Well, treating others nicely is also contagious. And tragically, treating others in a cruel manner is also contagious. And then many studies have been done about these phone solicitors, how when they get abused often on the phone, how that then translates into the way that they interact with their people. So you're nice to someone, you're being nice to their husband or wife or their kids or their parents. It is an ever widening sphere of influence that we have. And like I said before, I discussed this in the source above. Number 14, the Sefer Mitzvah Katan, to love your friend, as it says, included in this is Hava'at Shalom Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, right? Is bringing peace between a person and his friend. Umachrio L'Kaf Zuchut, and to judge someone favorably. Like I said earlier on, you hope people will cut you some slack and judge you well. Well, start that process. Start that chain reaction by doing it to others. V'hosef ben Azai, and ben Azai added on, he said, Gadol emenu shenemar ki b'tzelem Elokim, asat adam. Benazai brought it to a level even more strongly in Rabbi Akiva, because man was created in the image of God. Perish even if a person is not careful about their own honor, that does not excuse them for not being careful, particular about the honor of the other person. This person is a reflection of God. The way that you're treating this person is the way that you are treating and viewing God, Hashem himself. The effects of not being careful with this, the effects are actually frightening. Actually frightening. King David wrote, Bake Shalom, seek peace, V'radfeyu, pursue it. One must know and understand the greatness of peace. Rabbi Yochanan explained, the first temple was destroyed because of the sins of idolatry, immorality, and murder. Why was the second temple destroyed? When the members of that generation were great scholars and distinguished in their charitable acts? Because there was baseless hatred amongst them. Obviously, the punishment for baseless hatred is immense for those who committed the three cardinal sins of the Torah, were redeemed after only 70 years. The Babylonian exile between the destruction of the first temple and the building of the second temple was a sum total of 70 years. While those whose only flaw was a baseless hatred have not yet been redeemed, and the time of their, I would say the time of our redemption is not known. And therefore, we have a concept, it says in Pirkei Avos, Lufum Tsara Agra, based on how difficult something is, that determines the reward for it, or that which is gained from it. And therefore, if we're living during such a polarized time, where it's so easy to pick sides and to demean and denigrate anyone who sees things differently, so it's so easy to do that. So if that's the case, then certainly when we, during this difficult time, overcome that and make sure to show and display respect to every person, that certainly will help us towards this ultimate geula, redemption. May it come speedily in our days. So let's utilize these opportunities when it might be more challenging to especially now be careful with our conversations, with our respect to one another, and the same way that we hope someone else can respect me for having my opinion, even though they might differ, let's make sure that we respect others with their opinion, even though we might differ. Okay, my friends. Any points, questions? Yes, Cheryl.
So I understand what you're saying. So I have an analogy. So before the Holocaust, what if people realized what was going on in that country? So, and maybe not even to the full extent, but they could see that there was bad things that, and groups were targeted. Should not the leaders have voiced that?
So I'll share with you something very interesting happened to me last week. After I had written what I wrote about not picking sides, somebody wrote to me and said, Rabbi, do you think that the rabbis in Germany shouldn't have spoken up? I assumed this person was an anti-Trumper when he wrote that. Actually, this person was a pro-Trumper. when he wrote that. But each side could just as easily compare each side is comparing the other side to the worst of Germany before the elections. That's what each side is comparing. So yes, in a case where it's black and white, if Louis Farrakhan was running, or I might even say if Bernie Sanders was running, someone who has come out so forcefully against Israel, then maybe the situation would be different. But over here, the extreme on the right and the extreme on the left are equally dangerous. And each side says, oh, that side is the extreme. And this one says, no, that side is the extreme. So I don't think we can compare this to a early 1930s in Germany, because it is so polarized over how that comparison should be drawn. So
Well,
that's
when
the state of where we're at now.
when you understand that they've taken God out of the Pledge of Allegiance and other things like this.
You know, the extreme on either side is very dangerous. Taking God out of the Pledge of Allegiance, however one feels about that, I think as Jews, we're very happy to have separation of church and state. That has been a tremendous blessing for us, that the United States has a separation of church and state. Exactly how far should that be extended? There are different views, but the underlying principle of separation of church and state has served the Jewish people very well in the United States. So God in the Pledge of Allegiance, I think, is a question of, so how far should that be pushed or not? So again, let's not focus on that which divides us. There's enough division out there. Let's focus on that which unites us. And we're all in this ship together. And let's make sure that it sails, that it stays afloat, and it makes its way to the Geula, to Israel. Mheira v'yameinu, speedily in our days. Amen. Okay, my friends. We'll call it over here. Okay, anybody else? Okay. Just quickly, was this, in terms of the video clarity and the audio, was this as good as it's been, better than it's been? I know I haven't gone in and out, so I'm appreciative of that. Better than it's been, just as good?
It's better.
I think it was good.
Better. Good. Okay, so I'm not going off my laptop anymore. I'm going off my computer with a webcam that was attached to it. Good. And I didn't freeze in the middle, and you didn't lose me in the middle, which I know is frustrating to all. Good. All right, everybody, keep in mind that Saturday night, 6 o'clock, we're having a musical Havdalah. So please feel free and join and let other people know. And Monday night at 8 o'clock, Kristallnacht, Professor Fred Johnson, who was there during Kristallnacht, will be speaking and sharing his experiences with us. Very, very, very worthwhile. He'll be speaking. There'll be a time for questions afterwards. That's Monday night at 8 o'clock. So Saturday night at 6 p.m., Havdalah guitar. Monday night, 8 p.m., Kristallnacht, from the heart of a person who, as a young boy, was there the night of Kristallnacht. That's 8 p.m. Monday night, Professor Fred Johnson. Good seeing everybody. Signing off now.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Be well, everybody. Be well, be well.
Thank you. Thank you.